This video is for educational purposes. Bristol is a city, ceremonial county, and unitary authority in England. On the River Avon, it is bordered by the ceremonial counties of Gloucestershire to the north and Somerset to the south. It is in the west of England combined authority and the most populous city in southwest England. The wider Bristol built-up area is the 11th most populous urban area in the United Kingdom. Kindly subscribe to this channel and share this video with your friends and families. Iron Age hill forts and Roman villas were built near the confluence of the rivers Frome and Avon. Around the beginning of the 11th century, the settlement was known as Brigstow, Old English, the place at the bridge. Bristol received a royal charter in 1155 and was historically divided between Gloucestershire and Somerset until 1373 when it became a county corporate. From the 13th to the 18th century, Bristol was among the top 3 English cities, after London, in tax receipts. A major port, Bristol was a starting place for early voyages of exploration to the New World. On a ship out of Bristol in 1497, John Cabot, a Venetian, became the first European to land on mainland North America. In 1499, William Weston, a Bristol merchant, was the first Englishman to lead an exploration to North America. At the height of the Bristol slave trade, from 1700 to 1807, more than 2,000 slave ships carried an estimated 500,000 people from Africa to slavery in the Americas. The port of Bristol has since moved from Bristol Harbour in the city centre to the Severn estuary at Avonmouth and Royal Portbury Dock. Bristol's modern economy is built on the creative media, electronics, and aerospace industries. The city centre docks have been redeveloped as centres of heritage and culture. The city had the largest circulating community currency in the UK, the Bristol pound, which was pegged to the pound sterling before it ceased operation in August 2020. The city has 2 universities, the University of Bristol and the University of the West of England, UW Bristol. There are a variety of artistic and sporting organizations and venues including the Royal West of England Academy, the Arnolfini, Spike Island, Ashton Gate, and the Memorial Stadium. It is connected to London and other major UK cities by road and rail, and to the world by sea and air, road, by the M5 and M4, which connect to the city centre by the Portway and M32, rail, via Bristol Temple Meads and Bristol Parkway mainline rail stations, and Bristol Airport. Bristol was named the best city in Britain in which to live in 2014 and 2017. It won the European Green Capital Award in 2015. Early recorded place names in the Bristol area include the Roman-era British Celtic Abona, derived from the name of the Avon, and the archaic Welsh Caer Oder Ford on the Chasm, which may have been calqued as the modern English Clifton. The current name Bristol derives from the Old English form Brigstow, which is typically etymologized as place at the bridge. It has also been suggested that Brigstow means the place called bridge by the place called Stow, the Stow in question referring to an early religious meeting place at what is now College Green. However, other derivations have been proposed. It appears that the form Brigstow prevailed until 1204. In the Bristolian, the tendency for the local dialect to add the sound L to many words ending in a neutral vowel is what eventually changed the name to Bristol. The original form of the name survives as the surname Bristow, which is derived from the city. Archaeological finds, including flint tools believed to be between 300,000 and 126,000 years old made with the Levallois technique, indicate the presence of Neanderthals in the Shire Hampton and St. Annis areas of Bristol during the Middle Paleolithic. Iron Age hill forts near the city are at Lee Woods and Clifton Down, on the side of the Avon Gorge, and on King's Weston Hill near Henbury. A Roman settlement, Abona, existed at what is now Sea Mills, connected to Bath by a Roman road. Another was at the present-day Inns Court. Isolated Roman villas and small forts and settlements were also scattered throughout the area. Bristol was founded by 1000. By about 1020, it was a trading center with a mint-producing silver pennies bearing its name. By 1067, Brigstow was a well-fortified and that year the townsmen beat back a raiding party from Ireland led by 3 of Harold Godwinson's sons. Under Norman rule, the town had one of the strongest castles in southern England. Bristol was the place of exile for Diarmait Mac Murchada, the Irish king of Leinster, after being overthrown. The Bristol merchants subsequently played a prominent role in funding Richard Strongbow de Clare and the Norman invasion of Ireland. 15th century pictorial map of Bristol, radiating from the town centre. Robert Ricketts' map of Bristol, drawn when he became common clerk of the town in 1478. At the center, it shows the High Cross. The port developed in the 11th century around the confluence of the rivers Frome and Avon, adjacent to Bristol Bridge just outside the town walls. By the 12th century, there was an important Jewish community in Bristol which survived through to the late 13th century when all Jews were expelled from England. The stone bridge built in 1247 was replaced by the current bridge during the 1760s. The town incorporated neighboring suburbs and became a county in 1373, the first town in England to be given this status. During this period, Bristol became a shipbuilding and manufacturing center. By the 14th century, Bristol, York, and Norwich were England's largest medieval towns after London. 1/3 to 1/2 of the population died in the Black Death of 1348–49, which checked population growth. And its population remained between 10,000 and 12,000 for most of the 15th and 16th centuries. During the 15th century, Bristol was the second most important port in the country, trading with Ireland, Iceland, and Gascony. It was the starting point for many voyages, including Robert Sturmey's 1457–58 unsuccessful attempt to break the Italian monopoly of eastern Mediterranean trade. New exploration voyages were launched by Venetian John Cabot, who in 1497 made landfall in North America. A 1499 voyage, led by merchant William Weston of Bristol, was the first expedition commanded by an Englishman to North America. During the first decade of the 16th century, Bristol's merchants undertook a series of exploration voyages to North America and even founded a commercial organization, the Company Adventurers to the Newfoundland, to assist their endeavors. However, they seem to have lost interest in North America after 1509, having incurred great expenses and made little profit. During the 16th century, Bristol merchants concentrated on developing trade with Spain and its American colonies. This included the smuggling of prohibited goods, such as food and guns, to Iberia during the Anglo-Spanish War, 1585–1604. Bristol's illicit trade grew enormously after 1558, becoming integral to its economy. The original Diocese of Bristol was founded in 1542, when the former Abbey of St. Augustine, founded by Robert Fitzhardinge 400 years earlier, became Bristol Cathedral. Bristol also gained city status that year. In the 1640s, during the English Civil War, the city was occupied by Royalists, who built the Royal Ford House on the site of an earlier parliamentarian stronghold. Fishermen from Bristol, who had fished the Grand Banks of Newfoundland since the 16th century, began settling Newfoundland permanently in larger numbers during the 17th century, establishing colonies at Bristol's Hope and Cupid's Cove. Growth of the city and trade came with the rise of England's American colonies in the 17th century. Bristol's location on the west side of Great Britain gave its ships an advantage in sailing to and from the New World, and the city's merchants made the most of it. With the city becoming one of the two leading outports in all of England by the middle of the 18th century, Bristol was the slave capital of England. In 1755, it had the largest number of slave traders in the country with 237, as against London's 147. It was a major supplier of slaves to South Carolina before 1750. An engraving showing at the top a sailing ship and paddle steamer in a harbor, with sheds and a church spire. On either side arched gateways, all above a scroll with the word Bristol. Below a street scene showing pedestrians and a horse-drawn carriage outside a large ornate building with a colonnade and arched windows above. A grand staircase with two figures ascending and other figures on a balcony. A caption reading Exterior, Colston Hall, and Staircase, Colston Hall. Below, two street scenes and a view of a large stone building with flying buttresses and a square tower, with the caption Bristol Cathedral. At the bottom, views of a church interior, a cloister with a man mowing grass and archways with two men in conversation. An 1873 engraving showing Colston Hall, the port and cathedral of Bristol. The 18th century saw an expansion of Bristol's population, 45,000 in 1750, and its role in the Atlantic trade in Africans taken for slavery to the Americas. Bristol and later Liverpool became centers of the triangular trade. Manufactured goods were shipped to West Africa and exchanged for Africans. The enslaved captives were transported across the Atlantic to the Americas in the Middle Passage under brutal conditions. Plantation goods such as sugar, tobacco, rum, rice, cotton, and a few slaves, sold to the aristocracy as house servants, returned across the Atlantic to England. Some household slaves were baptized in the hope this would lead them to be freed. The Somerset case of 1772 clarified that slavery was illegal in England. At the height of the Bristol slave trade from 1700 to 1807, more than 2,000 slave ships carried a conservatively estimated 500,000 people from Africa to slavery in the Americas. In 1739, John Wesley founded the first Methodist chapel, the New Room, in Bristol. Wesley, along with his brother Charles Wesley and George Whitefield, preached to large congregations in Bristol and the neighboring village of Kingswood, often in the open air. Wesley published a pamphlet on slavery, titled Thoughts Upon Slavery, in 1774, and the Society of Friends began lobbying against slavery in Bristol in 1783. The city's signs remained nonetheless strongly anti-abolitionist. Thomas Clarkson came to Bristol to study the slave trade and gained access to the Society of Merchant Venturers records. One of his contacts was the owner of the Seven Stars public house, who boarded sailors Clarkson sought to mate. Through these sailors, he was able to observe how slaver captains and first mates plied and stupefied seamen with drink to sign them up. Other informants included ship surgeons and seamen seeking redress. When William Wilberforce began his parliamentary abolition campaign on May 12, 1788, he recalled the history of the Irish slave trade from Bristol, which he provocatively claimed continued into the reign of Henry VII. Hannah More, originally from Bristol, and a good friend of both Wilberforce and Clarkson, published Slavery, a poem, in 1788, just as Wilberforce began his parliamentary campaign. His major speech on April 2, 1792 likewise described the Bristol slave trade specifically and led to the arrest, trial, and subsequent acquittal of a local slaver captain named Kimber. The city was associated with Victorian engineer Isambard Kingdom Brunel, who designed the Great Western Railway between Bristol and London Paddington, two pioneering Bristol-built ocean-going steamships, SS Great Britain and SS Great Western, and the Clifton Suspension Bridge. The new railway replaced the Kennet and Avon Canal, which had fully opened in 1810 as the main route for the transport of goods between Bristol and London. Competition from Liverpool, beginning around 1760, disruptions of maritime commerce due to war with France, 1793, and the abolition of the slave trade, 1807, contributed to Bristol's failure to keep pace with the newer manufacturing centers of northern England and the West Midlands. The title Avon Gorge, which had secured the port during the Middle Ages, had become a liability. In 1804, 09 planned to improve the city's port with a floating harbor designed by William Jessup was a costly error, requiring high harbor fees. During the 19th century, Samuel Plimsoll, known as the sailor's friend, campaigned to make the seas safer. Shocked by overloaded vessels, he successfully fought for a compulsory load line on ships. By 1867, ships were getting larger, and the meanders in the River Avon prevented boats over 300 feet, 90 meters, from reaching the harbor, resulting in falling trade. The port facilities were migrating downstream to Avonmouth, and new industrial complexes were founded there. Some of the traditional industries, including copper and brass manufacture, went into decline, but the import and processing of tobacco flourished with the expansion of the W.D. and H.O. Wills business. Supported by new industry and growing commerce, Bristol's population, 66,000 in 1801, quintupled during the 19th century, resulting in the creation of new suburbs such as Clifton and Cotham. These provide architectural examples from the Georgian to the Regency style, with many fine terraces and villas facing the road and at right angles to it. In the early 19th century, the Romantic medieval Gothic style appeared, partially as a reaction against the symmetry of Palladianism, and can be seen in buildings such as the Bristol City Museum and Art Gallery, the Royal West of England Academy, and the Victoria Rooms. Riots broke out in 1793 and 1831, the first over the renewal of tolls on Bristol Bridge, and the second against the rejection of the Second Reform Bill by the House of Lords. The population by 1841 had reached 140,158. The Diocese of Bristol had undergone several boundary changes by 1897 when it was reconstituted into the configuration which has lasted into the 21st century. From a population of about 330,000 in 1901, Bristol grew steadily during the 20th century, peaking at 428,089 in 1971. Its Avonmouth docklands were enlarged during the early 1900s by the Royal Edward Dock. Another new dock, the Royal Portbury Dock, opened across the river from Avonmouth during the 1970s. As air travel grew in the first half of the century, aircraft manufacturers built factories. The unsuccessful Bristol International Exhibition was held on Ashton Meadows in the Bower Ashton area in 1914. After the premature closure of the exhibition, the site was used, until 1919, as barracks for the Gloucestershire Regiment during World War I. Bristol was heavily damaged by Luftwaffe raids during World War II. About 1,300 people living or working in the city were killed and nearly 100,000 buildings were damaged, at least 3,000 beyond repair. Kindly subscribe to this channel and share this video with your friends and families. See you in the next one.